Recently I made a video on how to read poetry. In that video I thought it was important not to go into how to analyse a poem in depth, because it's important as poetry lovers to differentiate between the two. We should be able to kick off our shoes, put our feet up and enjoy a poem. And then, if we decide to, analyse it afterwards. And that's what this video is going to be about.
You're going to make a poetry boring.
For some, maybe. But for others, definitely not. I have to admit, I don't tend to do in-depth analysis of poems very often. Okay, pretty much never. I prefer to just read a poem for the fun of it and let the subconscious do all the work and figure it out and tell me how I feel about it. But if we want to be poets of knowledge and craftsmanship, it's important we at least teach ourselves how to analyse a poem so that we can do it if ever we need to. Even if it's just another tool to hang up on the wall of our workshop. But before I show you how to do that, I just want to direct your eyes down to this jumper. I am selling it, it's part of my merchandise. All the sales really help me out with the work that I do and my poetry and my YouTube channel, etc, etc. So if poetry runs your life, if you're devoted to poetry and it has made you its bit, the link will be down in the description if you want to get yourself a jumper. They come in grey, which is what I'm wearing, and they also come in white. So check that out. Let's get into the video. Now, of course, making two videos with very similar topics and subjects, there are going to be some crossovers. So I'm going to assume that you haven't watched my How to Read Poetry video, which you should, by the way, because it's all about how to read and enjoy poetry before all the hard brain work of analysis comes in. So yes, I'm going to assume you haven't watched that video, and I'll be starting from the beginning, and I'll probably recover some of those steps. Please do grab a pen and paper and jot down the headings and tips as I go along. And make sure you stay until the end of the video, because I managed to convince one of my award-winning poet friends to analyse one of my poems, and she did a pretty good job. So yes, hang around for that and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Let's get into it. So, step one, read the poem. Read it out loud. Always read a poem out loud if you're in a position to do so, so that you can get the full effect of the meter and the sound and the way the poet has written it to sound. Does that make sense? Did I say sound a lot? Probably. Once you've read the poem, just sit with it for a second. Ask yourself what you think the poem is about. What effect did it have on you? And then read it again and see if your thoughts change, or if the second reading just cements your original thoughts. Keep in mind, by the way, that your initial thoughts of the poem and understanding of it is never usually far off. That's not always the case. And if you're reading one of the greats, there are usually some hidden gems somewhere along the road, so it's worth doing. Next, figure out if the poem is in any kind of form. If so, does that form say anything about the poem? For example, if a poem is written in a Shakespearean sonnet, traditionally those poems were written to praise. So, to throw something at you, and it's a very strange sort of example, one to get you thinking, if it's a sonnet written about austerity, what might that say? Next, consider punctuation. What does that exclamation point say to you? Why has the poet used it? Is there any punctuation at all? If not, is it to make any sort of point?
I didn't use punctuation because I am being cool and down with it.
Sadly, this does tend to be the case nowadays, but investigate anyway. You may be pleasantly surprised to find that the poet is actually refusing to use centuries and centuries of developing English literacy for an actual reason. Also look for line breaks, stanza breaks, and pauses. Once you've decoded the poet's form, take a look at their use of other techniques. Rhymes, alliteration, metaphors, and similes. See if you can find a possible reason for the poet using them. What do they convey? Is there any repetition? If so, why is there repetition? It's just started raining. What does that tell you about the poet poem and why the poem was written. Next, you're going to try and want to figure out the tone and emotion of the piece. You can figure this out by reading the poem again. It's always useful to read the poem again, but read it over and pull out any words that convey its tone or its emotion. Are there any words that really grab you, like, I don't know, hatred or longing? You get the point, I hope. Ask yourself if there is an underlining theme or message of the poem. Is the poet clearly trying to say something? So, read the poem again, take it slow, read it line by line, and really try and connect with it and figure out what each line is trying to say, and see if anything comes up time and time again. Is there anything recurring? What were the poet's influences? Here's where things get a little bit more tricky. To help you decipher a poem, especially if you haven't built up a very clear... My goodness, I hate living in England! What was I saying? Especially if you haven't already built up a pretty clear image of what the poem means by now, research the poet. See if you can find out about them as a person. Who were their influences? What inspires them? Was there anything going on in the world around them that would have inspired them and impelled them to write this piece? Maybe outbreak of war? Does the poem itself speak about a very specific moment in time? Find out more about that specific event to help you understand where the poet is coming from. Having done all this work, read over your notes and answers to these questions, let them sink in, and then read the poem one final time, allowing your analysis to colour the way you read the piece now. I thought it would be really cool to ask one of my poet friends to analyse one of my own pieces. So she did, and she sent me a Word document. I won't kind of do a long piece on that. I will literally just flash up the notes that she made on the screen now. You can pause the video if you want to read it and find out what she did. And if you want to if you're like me, you learn from observing and seeing things. Or you can just keep watching the video right to the end and move on. That's up to you. So I'm going to flash it up now, take a read, and then resume the video, I guess. So as you can see, analysis can take a lot of time and brain power, but it can also be really rewarding. Doing this video and brushing up on my own skills has actually given me a newfound love for it. Remember, analysis isn't for everyone, and doing things this way might not be either. It's just my way of doing things. Alternatively, you can scrap all of this and find an analysis of a poem somewhere on Google, but where is the fun in that, my friends? My name's Adam Gary and I write and talk a lot, and I appreciate you all sticking by me and listening to what I have to say or reading what I have to write. If you want to know more about how you can become a working poet and making money from your poetry, check the link in my description down below to download my free Become a Working Poet PDF. If you like the video, I would really appreciate you showing your support by hitting the like button and maybe even subscribing too for more videos like this. I post every Tuesday. Also, I'm around on social media, so if you want to hang out and talk poetry, hit me up on Instagram and TikTok and let's hang out. See you next week.